Mount&Blade by Taleworlds Entertainment. Taleworlds and Taleworlds, this lot, is a non-linear game set in the fictional continent of Calvadia, home to 5 oft-warring kingdoms and no small number of shifty ne'er-do-wells. Your goal is to make your way in this realm in whichever way you choose. Character creation is pleasantly elaborate, giving you a multitude of features to decide upon, such as gender, background history, which determines much of the starting stats and equipment, and also your character's chin size. Do you want a rounded head or a comically square affair with a goatee, or perhaps something in between? The choices are many. You start out as an impoverished ragamuffin, plonked down in the middle of nowhere with nothing but a rusty weapon, flimsy armour which likely hasn't been washed in a score of months, 50 helpings of salted herring, and a horse with a dodgy spine to your name. With command of such formidable resources, you set off to accumulate wealth and notoriety. As the name of the game implies, this is best accomplished through the slicing of things. There's a fair chance that on your way to the closest town or village in search of employment, you'll be accosted by a troop of recidivists. Needless to say, they plan to whack you upside the sconce, steal all of your things, and sell you to the nearest slaver. In practice, if you should be captured by bandits, you'll typically get dragged around the map for about a day, have surprisingly little of your stuff stolen, and then spontaneously escape. By at large, however, these disreputable gentlemen constitute your primary source of income during the early stages of the game. You can improve your starting arms and armour by ripping theirs off their rapidly cooling bodies, sell excess loot at said towns for woefully less than it's worth, and if you're so inclined, you can knock your assailants unconscious with a blunt instrument and sell them in bars for a fixed price of 50 quid. When you say it like that, it sounds kind of odd. Sooner or later, you'll likely want to employ other persons into your service. This can take the form of spindly, cadaverous rascals from villages who carry nothing more than a sickle and a dream. They, much like yourself, gain experience over time and, assuming they survive, and they probably won't, they can ascend to become knights, lancers, sergeants or huskars, depending on their starting nation, who will still inevitably die later on, forcing you to keep replenishing your stock and starting the process again. Additionally, you can hire mercenaries from local taverns for often extortionate sums of money. These are better equipped than the economic peasant soldiery, but they're just as prone to that inconsiderate dying habit as well. Finally, there are a number of NPCs who will join your party, some for free and some for a price. Once again, these can be found in bars. All the cool people are perpetually getting drunk, it seems. Unlike the rest of the nameless chatter in your employ, these characters are strangely immune to death. You can equip them with armour, weapons or mounts, and give them skills beneficial to the party. These hero characters can help fill voids in your group's skill set, such as first aid, engineering and training, which you may not be well versed in yourself. These NPCs will also provide exposition about certain regions, typically offering information about choice commodities to buy at one town or other. They may also spontaneously extol the virtues of another NPC in your group, or else they may bitch about one. Such rivalries in the ranks can lead to desertions, and it's a matter of trial and error, or checking the wiki, to find out who works well with who. Partaking in activities which these NPCs disapprove of may also cause them to leave you, and each character's opinion of what constitutes good or bad behaviour varies. Managing a party is a straightforward but occasionally annoying process. All you really need to do is make sure you have money enough for their monthly wage. I think it's monthly, payday just seems to happen at random, I've found. You also need to keep them fed with any variety of foodstuffs. Being somewhat pedantic myself, I tend to make sure that bread, meat and fruit or vegetables are on offer for the sake of providing a balanced diet. An army marches on its stomach, and the last thing you want is for a fighting force to be struck by the squits and dysentery. In game, however, a variety of foodstuffs, while having a positive effect on morale, doesn't really make much difference overall. Morale is another factor which can affect your party. If it falls enough, then you'll have ingrates deserting you, and the larger your party gets, the harder it becomes to keep morale up. Fortunately, to fix morale, all you need to do is track down a band of enemies and smite them. Nothing brightens the day of a Middle Ages mercenary like parting someone from their head. With each successful battle, you gain notoriety. The more challenging the battle, the more you get. Finally, the number of misfortunate people stumbling across fields of hewn corpses, with your banner flying proudly in the centre, and telling the tale to their fellows will gain you the attention of the nobility. Should you approach a lord with sufficiently high renown, and ask them for work, they'll probably offer you the position of a mercenary captain in the service of their king. Later on, you can ask to become a lord in their service, or alternatively, kings themselves may feel so inclined to offer you a vassalage, which, should you accept, shall equate to you gaining control of the most impoverished, famine-stricken whole of a village in the kingdom. As if this wasn't reward enough, you'll also earn the animosity of whichever lord happened to own that village before you. It's at this point that the world starts to become far less straightforward for your character. Whereas once you were a dashing adventurer doing good deeds, or else whereas once you were a varlet harrying villages and caravans, but for simplicity's sake let's assume the path of goodishness was taken, now you are in the service of a nation, and are expected to take part in their war. In practice, this means that whereas once your enemies were criminals, and you fought in defence of the common man, now you turn your blade and followers against the soldiers of another nation. Minimum wage serfs, doubtless conscripted and taken away from their homes, families and harvests, to fight for some overly rich, blood-hungry lordling. Imagine the fate of young Axton here. Not long before, when he was but a farmer's son in some nameless village, he was treated to the sight of you and your small army charging a force of brigands who had made their nest therein. Everyone hailed him as a hero, and his example inspired the young villager to go out and seek his own fortune one day by doing good deeds and striking back against banditry. As ill luck would have it, though, one day saw the arrival of the bulbous Lord Timothy at his village, who proceeded to drag off no small number of menfolk for the wars, Axton included. Not quite what Axton had in mind, but nevertheless, he remembers the example you showed him, the hero of his homeland, and it inspires and comforts him during the hard days and frozen nights. It halts his despair when disease begins to encroach into the ranks, and it steels him against the fear of a battle which grows ever closer. The day comes. He sees the invading army on the horizon. Afraid, but resolute, he stands firm in the shield wall and is ready to do his duty. But, wait, he recognises that helmet, that coat of arms. Good heavens, it's you, the hero of his village, at the head of the invading hordes. Unbelievable. How can this paragon of a man possibly have sided with the enemy of... Hang on, is he heading your way? Rend, slice and misfortune. The last thing young Axton ever sees is a flash of metal before his head is split in twain by your blade. As time goes on, it just gets worse. Every accomplishment comes at a cost of lives. Captured castles and towns that you help win for your kingdom must first be smashed into submission, and more often than not it will involve slaying every last defender therein, after which, if you're lucky, it might be awarded to you to rule in the stead of your master, which in practice means nothing more than visiting to drop off prisoners, station guardsmen, build cumbersome, costly and largely unnecessary improvements, and collect the tax money. If you prefer, the option exists to seek out a claim holder, an NPC living in exile who claims to be the rightful ruler of their country. If you choose to champion their cause and get them the throne back through force, you have the distinction of being single-handedly responsible for starting a civil war, with kith and kin taking up arms against each other for the sake of one of two regal swine and their right to rule whatever's left of the country after the war, death and destruction finally comes to an end. Meanwhile, the unburied bodies you cut down to earn your rise and station still lie in the hillocks, flesh picked apart by carrion birds and their gear and wedding rings picked by cretins. Their widows cry in their hovels whilst you, their new master or mistress, sit in the castle of their former ousted protector. Well, actually, no they don't. What all this melodramatic storytelling alludes to is that the NPCs are, to a one, emotionless husks. They can be thanking you for saving their lives, or condemning you for having stolen their castle, and their faces never display anything except for this semi-stoned expression of nonchalance. Even after you rip someone to shreds with a speeding sword on horseback, and their ruined, bloodied body flails and flops to the ground, they still seem rather unemotive in the facial department. Compare this hangdog visage, for example, with the mugshot of Colonel Halcyon from the Wing Commander series. This guy conveys serious rage with just a twitch of his pixelated eyebrows. This sight was in fact one of my childhood horrors, but I digress. Doom and gloom isn't a sad inevitability in this game, however. If you so choose, you can avoid the destructive politics and wars of the land altogether, and spend your days as a humble merchant travelling from town to town trading in velvet. Yeah. There are a number of non-lethal pursuits to be had requiring the use of a sword arm. You can join tournaments, or doff your shirt and breeks and run widdershins about a sandy arena, beating the stuffing out of sweaty males for coin. Alternatively, you can beat the crap out of slanderous nobles who've been spreading nasty rumours about ladies at court. Many of the quests and deeds you undertake in the game affect your honour rating. Quite simply, doing good, often sacrificial deeds will earn you honour, whereas pillaging and ruffianism will lose you honour, which in turn affects how characters in the game respond to you. The population of a village is unlikely to be welcoming if you looted them the day before, poisoned their well and burned down their windmill, for example. Where honour, or lack thereof, is chiefly decided is when dealing with the lords. For example, at times, after crushing one of their armies, you will have the chance to take an enemy lord prisoner, and later sell him back to his nation for a princely sum of money. Or else release him for an incremental increase in honour and favour with said lord. Sometimes. The more bastardly of the nobles, and there are plenty of those, are understandably humiliated about having been bested and then callously dismissed, and shall make a point of swearing vengeance later on. The system of morals and honour is surprisingly complex in the game, despite being somewhat contradictory at times. For example, one day you may receive a quest from a lord asking you to go forth and bring a murderer to justice, a right and proper quest, mickle of virtue. The next day, however, they may ask you to sacrifice one of your soldiers to torture and death as part of an underhand plot to frame an enemy noble for treachery. To refuse this quest gains you honour, but causes the quest giver to think far less of you, spineless weenie that you have proven yourself to be in his eyes. Furthermore, what endears you to some people may diminish you in the eyes of others. The aforementioned bounty hunting mission, for example, will leave a sour taste in the mouths of those who dwell in whichever place your prey has taken refuge. Apparently, people don't take too kindly to metal-clad assassins wandering in, butchering someone on their streets and leaving the body lying about for their children to find. There are many other examples of this kind of karmic side-taking throughout the game, and it serves to add an agreeable element of plausibility. It occurs to me that I may be presenting a rather negative impression of the game, which is unwarranted in truth. If you would indulge me a moment's shameless hypocrisy, the combat and smiting is really what sells the game. From the realistic sound of hoofbeats and picturesque scenery, to the screams and the delightful wet sound of metal on meat when you swing an axe into the chest of your foeman, the combat feels both realistic and satisfying. In larger engagements, when you ride your horse into a cluster of peasants and kill them all one at a time, whilst they peck helplessly at your mail-clad heels with their rusty kitchen knives, you can feel like a veritable dread knight, doom of the land. And to lead a horde of bloodhounds over the walls of a castle and cut down each and every defender in the courtyard before finally breaching the Lord's Hall and splitting the paltry few survivors in half and leaving their corpses on the dinner table is a pleasure indeed. The world is large and involving, and there is plenty to keep you coming back day after day. Inevitably, however, it shall get samey, and odds are most players' ambitions would extend to more than just being the chief servant of a king, doing occasional odd jobs of pennies and pats on the head. Most of the game's shortcomings are reputedly addressed in the standalone expansion called Warblade, but I've never been able to find it, so I can't say for sure. The original game has also been modded in no end of ways, putting you in a variety of historical periods, fantasy settings, and even the Star Wars universe, so one way or another, there's always something new to explore. Overall, Mount&Blade is a fine game of equine slice work that, despite some flaws, is so engrossing it will have you playing it almost against your will.